When I walked into the National Transportation Safety Board hearing room in Atlanta, no one looked at me at first. The carpet muffled my steps. There was a soft rustle of suits, murmurs near the front where counsel gathered. A technician tested a microphone at the far table. I carried my hat under my arm, my badge clipped straight to my uniform. The air was cold from overactive air conditioning. My parents were already seated, third row from the front, center aisle. My mother wore pale blue. She always did for public things. Weddings, funerals, award ceremonies. She said it made her look soft, approachable. She kept her hands folded in her lap, the way she had when I graduated flight academy, not clapping, just still. My father sat beside her, relaxed, legs crossed, elbow draped over the back of the empty chair next to him. His mouth curled slightly upward when he saw me. He turned toward the man on his left. A stranger, maybe a journalist or staff member, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "Well, there's our Linda, playing dress-up again." The man didn't respond. My father didn't need him to. My mother glanced at me. Her eyes moved from my shoulder boards to my hair. She smiled, small and tight, like I'd caught her off guard. They had no idea what I was doing there. They thought I was assisting, carrying binders, sitting beside the real expert waiting for permission to speak. They didn't know the expert was me. I kept walking. My heels sounded sharper against the raised panel floor near the presentation area. I took my seat at the front table, next to the lead investigator and across from the review counsel. I opened my case file, slid the transcript binder toward the center of the desk. A technician adjusted the microphone in front of me. My hands were steady. 2 rows behind me, my sister sat at the defense table. Cassie Harper, 31, blonde, popular, photogenic. She wore a gray blazer and a white blouse, no pilot stripes. Her lawyer whispered something to her. She didn't respond. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe it was the setting. A hearing room is not a runway. We hadn't spoken since the night before Flight 317 went down. That was 8 weeks ago. At the last family dinner, Cassie had just returned from a promotional event in Miami. She arrived late, flung her bag down near the fireplace, and immediately launched into a story about how she'd made an entire hangar crew laugh during a mandatory briefing by pretending to forget the pre-check checklist. "Come on," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's not like anyone actually follows those things word for word." She looked at me when she said it, waiting. I didn't answer. She went on. "Told our father she'd charmed her flight instructor in the simulator the week before. He said he'd never seen anyone improvise an emergency landing that fast. I turned the whole session into a little show." She grinned and tossed her hair over one shoulder. "It's all just a game, Lindy. Just smile and don't stress it." My mother laughed. My father refilled her glass. I reached for the bread basket. That dinner lasted 2 hours. I spoke maybe 20 words. The next morning, I was back at my desk reviewing preliminary data on the turbine model used in a recent series of transcontinental engines. A week later, I was assigned to the Flight 317 case. Cassie was the co-pilot. Flight 317 departed from Newark at 06:05 hours. It was scheduled to arrive in Denver before 09:30. There were 146 souls on board. At 07:34, the plane experienced a left engine stall, followed by an erroneous flap extension at high speed. The captain, a 27-year veteran, attempted a recovery. The co-pilot issued conflicting altitude adjustments. Manual override was not properly engaged. At 07:37, the aircraft clipped a power relay tower during descent. The captain died on impact. Cassie survived. I received the call less than 3 hours later. I wasn't told who was on board. Just that I was being pulled into a high-priority incident requiring forensic analysis and NTSB liaison support. When I retrieved the CVR, cockpit voice recorder, I was alone. The audio was clean, uninterrupted, 30 minutes from takeoff to crash. I heard the captain's voice, measured, calm, procedural. I heard Cassie. She was joking, brushing off altitude warnings, making guesses about crosswinds. At one point, she asked if it was okay to wing it on a frequency call. The captain didn't laugh. At minute 22, the engine alert sounds. She curses, then goes quiet, then starts shouting orders, not following protocol, overlapping with tower commands. The captain tries to correct her. Then the feed cuts to wind shear. When the clip ended, I sat there for a long time. I didn't cry. I wrote the report. 72 pages, technical analysis, procedural breakdown, timeline overlays, no opinion, no blame, only facts. When I filed it, I didn't add my name to the signature line, but they recognized the formatting, the blue ice protocols. That's what they call it internally. A data integrity system I designed for crash sequence reconstruction. Most agencies train their staff on it now. I never asked them to. I never mentioned it to my family. They thought I worked in administration. Now, in the hearing room, Cassie's lawyer was on his feet. "Mr. Chairman, I have to object to the involvement of Miss Harper in this review. She is the defendant's older sister. This is a clear conflict of interest. This is a family matter, not a professional one." He said, "Miss Harper," like I was being corrected. He didn't say my rank or my title. But the lead investigator turned, leaned forward, studied my face, then looked down at the printed report in front of him. "Wait," he said. "Are you the Linda Harper?" I paused. "Yes, sir." He nodded once. "The blue ice protocols?" "Yes." He leaned back. "We train our entire engineering division on your procedures. You wrote the standard." The room fell silent. Even the lawyer sat down. My father didn't laugh this time. My mother's hands were still folded. And Cassie was looking at the floor. I had known this moment would come. Not the public recognition. That part didn't matter. But the moment when someone, anyone, said it plainly. You are not here because you are a sister. You are here because you are competent, because you earned it. Cassie never understood the difference. In our house, competence was invisible. What mattered was charm, presentation, timing. She knew how to fill a room. I knew how to run it. They called her the natural. They said I tried too hard. I used to think they were right. I stayed quiet. I worked longer hours. I turned down interviews. I deleted social media. I thought maybe if I kept my head down long enough, they'd see it. The weight, the discipline. But some people only see the story they want, and some people stop trying to be seen at all. The hearing resumed. I waited for my turn to present. When they called my name, I stood, walked to the screen, toggled the digital slides. Cassie didn't look at me. My parents didn't move. I cleared my throat and spoke, steady and restrained. "Good morning. My name is Major Linda Harper, Civil Aviation Unit, National Aviation Incident Division. I will now present the sequence findings for Flight 317, including timeline, procedural breakdown, and crew response analysis." No one interrupted. 2 days after that dinner, I got the call. The tone was clipped. Emergency review, immediate travel. FAA headquarters. The voice didn't use names. It never does when it's serious. By the time I landed in D.C., the data had already started arriving. Radar signatures, tower comms, initial black box audio. I worked through the night in a gray room with recycled air and coffee that tasted like dust. The second pass confirmed it. Suspected crew error, starting mid-flight, escalating quickly. A preliminary mechanical issue, but worsened, not resolved. The emergency checklist had been bypassed. Multiple decisions made against protocol. The captain had followed procedure. The co-pilot had not. I didn't react, not at first. I opened the audio file, clicked to minute 20, then 30. I adjusted the gain. Her voice came through. Cassie. Tight. Rushed. Uncertain. At first, she sounded like she always did in front of people she wanted to impress. Cheerful. Sure of herself. Speaking like she was performing. You could almost hear the smile in her voice. She made a joke about wind shear, called it cranky old turbulence, laughed when the captain issued a correction. Then the alert started, a tone that tells you the engine's fighting itself. She went silent, then flustered. She read out the wrong indicator, repeated it like saying it louder would make it true. The captain adjusted pitch. She questioned him. A delay. Another alert. The plane dropped into a slow, unrecoverable descent. The stall warning cut in and out. Cassie shouted. She shouted. The captain tried to level. You could hear him, calm, trying to reestablish control, telling her what to do, which switch to toggle, what angle to hold. She said, I'm trying, I don't, wait, should I, no, hang on. Then static, then the sound of ground proximity, then nothing. I sat with my finger on the pause key, and I remembered her saying, it's all just a game, Lindy, just smile. She was still playing, while the plane was going down. The internal team submitted their first draft 2 days later. They softened it, called the co-pilot's actions delayed responses under stress, called the captain's loss unfortunate. I rewrote it. 6 critical deviations from standard operating procedure, 4 missed callouts, 1 manual override that wasn't pulled, 0 mechanical failure sufficient to explain the loss of altitude, 0 compliance with post-stall checklist protocol. I attached my report, signed my name this time. I knew they would see it. One of the investigators pinged me 30 minutes later. Are you sure? Yes. Even with the family connection? Especially with the family connection. At the hearing, her lawyer stood again. I must raise the issue of bias. Miss Harper has a clear conflict of interest. The pilot in question is her sister. This is a family matter, not a professional one. He spoke like he was closing the door, not opening one. But then, Director Keene, the one who'd led operations during the Alaska Crosswinds probe, turned toward me. Miss Harper, he said slowly, did you write the recovery framework for the Blue Ice protocols? I did. He turned to the room. We use that model across every major incident now. It's become the foundation of aviation risk engineering. If there's anyone qualified to analyze this crash, it's her. No one else objected. Cassie's lawyer sat down. I was called forward. The lights dimmed slightly for the screen. I didn't bring notes. I knew the sequence by heart. I spoke calmly. At 0734, engine stall. At 0735, flaps extended. At 0736, failure to correct pitch. I played the audio. I watched the committee's faces. I didn't say Cassie's name until slide 5. And when I did, I said it the way we're trained to say it. Per recording timestamp and tower confirmation, the co-pilot, Cassandra Harper, issued a contradictory altitude adjustment at 0735. That action directly conflicted with the emergency descent protocol. No commentary, just the event. I kept going. Each time I used her name, I used her title first, co-pilot, second in command, not my sister. On slide 8, I displayed the checklist steps for high-speed flap failure. I read them aloud. Then I let the room listen to the voice log again, Cassie skipping each one, improvising. Silence followed. The committee didn't blink. I closed the file and stepped back. The chair of the board, a man who once oversaw the International Air Collision Arbitration, tapped his pen against the table. No further questions, he said. Cassie didn't lift her head. After the session adjourned for the day, I passed by my parents in the hallway. My mother was holding a paper cup of coffee. She nodded at me, then looked away. My father just stood there watching me. He didn't speak, but he didn't smile either. And for the first time in my life, he wasn't looking at Cassie. He was looking at me, carefully. I returned to Colorado 2 weeks later. The panel issued its final review. Cassie's license was suspended pending permanent revocation. Civil suits followed. Her legal team withdrew. She moved to California. She never flew again. At the National Aviation Safety Center, I was offered a lead specialist role. I took it, quietly. No announcement, just a desk, a team. I started designing new simulator scenarios for training cadets. One morning during the first week of instruction, I asked a room full of new recruits the same question I asked myself for years. When the system fails, who are you? A cadet in the second row raised her hand. Her voice was steady. We're the responsibility. I nodded. That was it. That was the answer. Not the show, not the charm, not the spotlight. Responsibility. I never went back for the holidays. No confrontation, no explanation. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't write any letters. I just stopped offering myself where I wasn't recognized. That spring, I gave a technical interview on PBS, a segment about aviation response standards. I explained the importance of repetition, of checklists, of silence in the cockpit when the alarms begin. I didn't mention Flight 317, but I said, there's no such thing as a game at 30,000 feet. There's only time and truth. You either respond or you don't. A week later, I got the email. From Joan Harper Linda, we saw your interview. You spoke about risk and responsibility. We're so proud of you. We're sorry we didn't see it before. I read it twice. Then I archived it. No anger, no relief, just air moving through a closed room. Recognition, when it comes late, isn't recognition. It's revision, and I don't revise the past to make others comfortable. Cassie's picture still appears in old flight school brochures, smiling, confident, still performing, but I keep a different image, a still frame from the cockpit video, 1 second before the stall, her hands off the controls, looking back at the captain, waiting. And that's what it came down to. When the alarm started, she waited for someone else. I never did. When I walked back into the hearing room on the second day, no one asked for clarification. The story had already taken root. Not the dramatic kind, not the one that grabs headlines, but the kind that moves differently. Slow, steady, silent. They'd reviewed my findings overnight, matched timestamps, checked procedural guides, reviewed 6 years of training records and audio logs. Everything held. The committee chair nodded as I approached the podium. I took my place beside the lead investigator. We didn't exchange pleasantries, just eye contact, professional, clean. The room was full again. A few reporters this time, legal observers, some industry reps from safety boards in other states. Cassie was already seated at the defense table. She wore the same blazer as the day before. The sleeves looked tighter. Her posture had changed, less defiant, more protective. Arms crossed, shoulders curled slightly in. She didn't look at me. Her lawyer leaned in and whispered something. She nodded barely. Across the aisle, my mother clutched her purse with both hands. Her jaw was tight, the way it got when she thought someone might see too much. My father sat with his arms crossed. He wasn't smiling. The chair opened the session. Major Harper, if you would continue with your assessment. I stepped forward. Slide 11, cockpit load distribution. I spoke evenly. At 073613, the co-pilot initiated a redundant manual flap control against standard advisory. The action was neither authorized nor coordinated with the captain. This misstep, under procedural guidelines, constitutes a Category 3 deviation. I didn't pause. I advanced the slide. Next, at 073619, a verbal exchange occurred between the captain and the co-pilot in which the co-pilot interrupted the command order. Audio played. The captain, leave it. Cassie, I've got it. Just let me. Another tone. The captain again, we're not leveled. Do not. And then static. I clicked forward. Despite the co-pilot's continued responses, no correction was successfully implemented before altitude loss reached critical. I stopped there, not because I had to, but because it was enough. The board didn't ask for elaboration. The lawyer cleared his throat. No questions at this time, he said. Cassie was staring down at the table now. She hadn't touched the pen in front of her. Her fingers were curled into fists on either side of the legal pad. Her lawyer reached out to say something. She didn't move. I walked back to my seat. The deliberation took 6 hours. That's short. They returned with a final report draft that matched nearly all of my procedural notes. The wording was careful. Language like critical error under duress, inadequate mitigation attempt, deviation from established protocol. They stopped short of using the word negligence. But the conclusion was clear. Cassie's license would be revoked indefinitely. She could apply for reinstatement after 5 years, but only under retraining with full FAA review and independent psychological evaluation. She didn't appeal. She stood, collected her things, walked out without turning around. No statement, no eye contact, no final word. My mother followed her. My father stayed in his seat for another 5 minutes, watching the screen. Then he left without speaking. Later that week, the director of the National Aviation Safety Center called. They were restructuring. Would I consider a move to Colorado Springs? I said yes. No hesitation. No questions about salary or title. I'd learned long ago that control doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with the right kind of silence. The office in Colorado wasn't big, but it had altitude, clear skies, long, quiet hallways. The kind of place where work meant something. I arrived on a Tuesday. Snow still crusted the curb. Inside, the walls were pale gray. Functional. The way I liked them. No portraits, no trophies, just systems. A new team of specialists had been assembled. 6 junior analysts, 2 field officers, 1 senior systems engineer from California who barely looked old enough to shave. I asked each of them the same question. Why are you here? The first said, I'm good at puzzles. The second, I want to prevent loss. The third, a young woman with a voice steadier than her hands, said, because my father never made it back. I nodded. I didn't offer my story. They didn't need it. They had their own reasons. On day 4, I led my first simulation session. The scenario was modeled after a cold-weather dual-engine stall, mid-descent, heavy tailwind, faulty ground proximity sensor. I watched them work through it. Some fumbled, some froze. But one of them, a quiet cadet with a scar just above his eyebrow, paused the simulation at minute 4, made the right call, reset the flap parameters, issued manual override. He turned and said, we don't guess. We read. I looked at him for a long time, and then I said it. We're the responsibility. That weekend, a local journalist called to request an interview. He wanted to talk about women in aviation safety. Trailblazers, he said, role models. I declined, not because I wasn't proud of my work, but because I knew what he wanted. He wanted Cassie. He wanted the contrast. He wanted the story of the boring sister who turned out to be the real hero. That was never the story. It wasn't about who was liked. It was about who stayed calm when the alarm started, who held the system together, who carried weight without asking for praise. 3 months into the new role, I received a letter, handwritten, postmarked from Sacramento, Cassie. The envelope was thin, no return address. Inside, 1 page. It read, you were right. I wasn't ready. You told me what mattered and I laughed. That's on me. I won't ask you to reply. Cass. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer. Didn't reread it. Didn't reply. It wasn't closure. It was admission. And admission doesn't change history. It just stops it from repeating. 6 months after I started, I was invited to speak at a Federal Review Board conference. I delivered a short presentation on adaptive protocol strategies. 40 slides. No filler. Afterward, a retired Navy commander approached me. He said, you remind me of someone I flew with once. Quiet. Always knew what to do before we knew we needed to do it. I nodded. He didn't need me to say thank you. He just needed to say it. Late one evening, I received another email, this time from my father. The subject line was blank. The body just said, we watched the segment. I didn't know. No signature. I didn't reply. Because he was wrong. He did know. He just didn't look. That winter, I stood outside the training hangar after hours, watching cadets run a final simulation. Snow was falling. Soft. Sparse. I stood with my hands in my pockets, watching them adjust checklists, cross-reference protocol, confirm airspeed. No one asked for help. They didn't need it. That's how I knew they were ready. They didn't need a hero. They needed systems that held under pressure. They needed someone who had been second and stayed, not to prove anything, but to keep the controls steady when everyone else reached for the eject. A year passed. No headlines. No reunions. No phone calls. The world moved on. So did I. The air at altitude had changed by then, drier, clearer. I was briefing international partners on cold weather deviation models and working on a redundancy loop design for dual pilot override. Long days, early mornings, silence, where noise used to live. Most of the team understood the work without needing stories. They didn't ask what brought me there. Didn't want the theater of a fall from grace or the satisfaction of public reckoning. They wanted precision. I gave it to them. I flew out to Washington in November for a closed-door security session. The room was beige, no windows. We reviewed 5 case studies in a row. Cassie's wasn't among them. That, too, was its own kind of verdict. At the hotel, I watched an old interview on the news, a pilot talking about burnout. The clip cut to footage of Cassie, smiling at a press event from 4 years ago, back before Flight 317. I muted the screen. The hotel bed was too soft, the kind that tries to comfort you before you need it. I slept on top of the covers. December brought snow early in Colorado Springs. The morning light came in weak and blue. One of the junior analysts slipped on the front steps and cracked her clipboard. I helped her up. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, red-faced. "Just embarrassed." I handed her the report she dropped. "Embarrassment's temporary," I said. "Facts last longer." She smiled, but I wasn't joking. The email came a week before the anniversary. From Joan Harper subject, "Saw your PBS interview date, December 10th time, 11:42. A.M. Linda, we watched your PBS segment. The part where you talked about pressure and responsibility. It was so clear. We're proud of you. I know we didn't say it before. I'm sorry for that. Love, Mom." I read it twice. The message was short, careful. It said nothing about Cassie, nothing about the hearing, nothing about the things they laughed at or the moments they dismissed me. Just recognition. Delayed. Polite. I didn't feel anything. Not relief, not anger, not even distance. It was just data now. I clicked archive and got back to work. In January, I was offered an internal transfer to head compliance testing at the National Center. It would mean more oversight, more systems, less time in the field. I took it. My desk overlooked the western ridge. On clear days, I could see the runway, tiny aircraft rising like possibilities. I taught newer staff how to structure voice transcript analysis, how to log timing with fingers flat and breath steady, how not to look away when the data said something painful. Most listened, one didn't. A younger man who asked questions that started with, "What if?" and ended with reasons to skip steps. I let him talk, then reassigned him to a quieter team, not punishment, containment. In February, a colleague forwarded me an event invitation, a panel in Los Angeles, Women in Command, the Future of Aviation. Cassie's name was on the flyer, bottom row, listed as former pilot, now author. I looked it up. She'd self-published a book, Sky Without a Net, a memoir. The description called it a story of survival and second chances. There was no mention of Flight 317. I didn't read it. I didn't go. The new team was sharp, disciplined. One of the analysts had a background in satellite communications. Another had flown surveillance routes in Alaska. They asked smart questions and answered carefully. On the last day of training, I handed them a short scenario with partial data. No names, no context, a stall event, mid-flight, a blank checklist in the file. "Who's responsible here?" I asked. They argued for 12 minutes. Then one of them, the youngest, said, "We can't know yet, but somebody made the choice to skip the list." "That's right," I said. "Someone always does." He paused. "Do we need to know who?" I looked at him. No, I said. We need to make sure it doesn't happen again. He nodded, wrote it down. The file on Flight 317 was closed in March. The final summary noted the procedural breakdown, cited the co-pilot's actions as compromised under pressure. No criminal charges, no further review. Cassie's license remained permanently revoked. She'd started a video channel by then, aviation commentary for non-pilots. It had sponsorships, a following. She looked different on camera, softer, framed by light she could control. I never watched a full clip. She stayed in California, gave interviews that skirted the line between fact and narrative. The audience didn't care. They liked her voice. They liked the idea of someone bouncing back. They never asked who caught the fall. The work changed after that. Not harder, just deeper. We began updating the incident response framework to account for human variables, not just mechanical ones. I pushed for tighter data review timelines, fewer assumptions, stricter simulation conditions. It wasn't glamorous, but systems never are. They don't clap. They don't lie. They don't rewrite memory for comfort. They just keep the plane in the air. On the anniversary, I drove out to the edge of the old military flight line. No one else was there. The fence was patched in 3 places. Snow traced the ridgeline like dust. I stood by the chain link for a long time. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say, just air and cold, and the memory of voices I no longer had to carry. 2 weeks later, a cadet brought me a newspaper article. "You're in this," she said. It was a feature about women in safety leadership. My name was in paragraph 5, brief, factual. She hovered, unsure what I'd do. I handed it back. "Don't read press," I said. "Read procedure." She nodded. I went back to work. I got one more letter from my father, handwritten, block print, no date. Just wanted to say, "You did right. We were wrong." That was all. No envelope, just folded into an old holiday card. I shredded it, not out of spite, but because I didn't need it anymore. When the audit team arrived from D.C., they asked about our performance history. I handed over 6 binders. "Everything's logged," I said. They flipped through, quiet. "Your analysts seem consistent," one said. "They are." "And your leadership model?" I paused, then said, "We don't guess." They wrote it down. Spring thaw came late. The runways stayed slick. We added a protocol for unexpected crosswinds during short field landings. One of the cadets asked who wrote it. "I did," I said. He nodded. "Thanks." That was it. No ceremony, no story, just accuracy. I still get messages sometimes. Cassie tags me in things. I don't respond. Not because I'm angry, but because that part of the flight is over, and I don't return to the cockpit once I've landed safely. My name isn't on any magazine cover. There's no statue, no slogan, just systems. That's enough. Because in the end, the story was never about family. It was about choice, about who takes the controls when everything fails, and who gets quiet, so the right voice can speak. Thank you for reading with care. I'm curious, what moment stayed with you? You're welcome to share, and if the story earned it, feel free to subscribe.